Hey, story lovers, welcome back to my channel. I have another good story for you. Tell me this. Have you ever heard of a cursed wedding dress? Well, this is a story of one such dress. So subscribe if you haven't already and sit back and enjoy. The morning sun bathed the bridal suite in a warm, golden glow in the city of Abuja. Ngozi stood before a full-length mirror, radiant, twirling in her wedding dress, the epitome of class, luxury, and sophistication. The dress was an off-the-shoulder masterpiece with delicate lace sleeves cascading down to her wrists. The bodice fit perfectly, adorned with shimmering crystals that caught the light with every movement. Layers of soft white tulle flowed from her waist, trailing behind her like a cloud, and the hem boasted intricate floral embroidery woven with silver thread. A long, elegant train completed the regal look. A subtle sparkle seemed to emanate from the dress itself, giving it an almost ethereal glow. Ngozi's laughter filled the room, a reflection of her excitement and love. Rema, her older sister, adjusted Ngozi's veil with a seemingly heartfelt smile. "You look like a queen," Rema murmured, her tone soft, but her eyes flickering with something unspoken. Ngozi beamed, oblivious. A knock on the door interrupted them. Rema stepped out and returned with a small, elegantly wrapped gift, supposedly from David. But instead of giving it to Ngozi, Rema slipped it into her own purse when Ngozi wasn't looking. As the day progressed, fleeting moments hinted at the dark undercurrents beneath the surface. Rema's grip tightened momentarily as she fastened a bracelet on Ngozi's wrist. During the reception, David and Rema exchanged glances across the room, loaded with unspoken tension. As the magical night wound down, Ngozi couldn't have been happier. She had married David Olamide, the love of her life, and as they bid farewell to their guests that night, Ngozi couldn't help but think that her life was about to be perfect. Waving goodbye and thanking guests for coming, they headed to the car that would take them to the airport for their honeymoon. Ngozi, still glowing in her wedding dress, held David's hand, her heart full of love and hope, completely unaware of the darkness that lay ahead. The car sped down a quiet, deserted road. Ngozi looked at David. Why had he taken a detour? She wondered to herself, but love blinded her to the danger she was in. Suddenly, headlights flashed in front of them, forcing the car to a screeching halt. Armed men appeared, dragging Ngozi out of the car. Her dress, once pristine, was now smeared with mud as she struggled, fear etched across her face. A loud bang echoed through the night. A searing pain shot through the back of Ngozi's head. Her vision blurred, and everything faded to black, every sense in her body dead. Except her ears, they remained sharp. Through the ringing, she heard hushed voices. David and Rema. Rema? Why was she... What was she doing here? Ngozi's fading mind tried to reason. Ngozi tried to speak, but she laid still and lifeless. "Is she dead?" Rema's voice trembled slightly. "Of course," David replied coldly. "Who lives after a shot to the back of the head?" Ngozi tried to scream, but her body wouldn't respond. She felt Rema's breath close to her ear. "You think I'd let you take Papa's land and wealth?" Rema hissed. "You were always the favorite, but not anymore." "Come on, let's go," she heard David yell. "It's not like she can hear you. We gotta get out of here. Let's just stick to the plan." As they retreated, leaving her in the dirt, a rage unlike any Ngozi had ever felt welled inside her. With her last breath, she whispered, "You betrayed me, my own sister and husband. I damn you both to hell. You will suffer a fate worse than mine. May your souls rot in eternal hell. You will never know peace." Lightning clapped and thunder roared. Her body vanished, leaving only the soiled wedding dress behind, glowing faintly under the moonlight. A few weeks later, in the bustling city of Lagos, Janet, a bubbly young seamstress, strolled home from her shop, humming to herself. As she passed a pile of garbage, something caught her eye, a faint glow. Curiosity piqued. She approached and uncovered the magnificent, though dirty, wedding dress. She marveled at its intricate design, the same shimmering crystals, silver-threaded embroidery, and delicate lace. Now dulled and stained, completely unaware of the dark history stitched into its seams, Janet's jaw dropped. It was the most stunning dress she had ever seen. Before finding the dress, Janet's bridal shop had been struggling. She had inherited the small shop from her late mother, who had been a beloved seamstress in their community. Janet had big dreams of turning the shop into a thriving business, but despite her talent and passion, customers were scarce. Bills piled up, and Janet often found herself working late into the night, sewing dresses that no one seemed interested in buying. She wondered if she'd have to close the shop soon. After finding the dress, Janet meticulously cleaned and restored it, adding it to her collection. In the days that followed, she noticed that the dress, now in her window display, attracted a lot of customers to her shop. Business began to pick up. Her fortune had changed, the shop was busier, and her financial troubles began to fade. Realizing the dress seemed to be a good luck charm of sorts, Janet decided it was not for sale, keeping it as a display piece to maintain her newfound success. However, everything changed when Amara entered the shop. Amara was 22 and the only child of a wealthy oil baron. She had been searching for the perfect wedding dress for months. Despite her wealth, nothing felt unique enough for her special day. One afternoon, while being driven through Lagos by her chauffeur, they encountered a roadblock and were forced to take a detour. As they passed Janet's bridal shop, Amara's eyes caught the dress displayed in the window. With a sudden burst of excitement, Amara screamed, "Stop!" startling her driver. She leapt out of the car and rushed into the shop, her heart pounding. Janet greeted her warmly, her hands resting on the counter. "Good afternoon, Ma," Janet said with a welcoming smile. "How can I help you?" Amara didn't waste a second. "That dress in the window. It's perfect. I need it for my wedding." Janet's smile faltered slightly. I'm so sorry, Ma. But that dress isn't for sale. It's part of my window display." Amara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Not for sale? Look, I'll pay whatever you want. Name your price." Janet shook her head gently. "I'm sorry, Ma. It's not for sale." Amara, determined, stepped closer. "Everything has a price. Name yours. I'll give you double the price of your most expensive dress here. Triple even. Just let me rent it for one day." Janet hesitated. The offer was tempting. More money than she'd ever made from a single dress. But something in her gut told her to refuse. "Please," Amara pleaded, her voice softening. "Ma, you don't know if it will even fit. I am not allowing any alterations on this dress," Janet said, starting to get a little anxious. "I don't know how I know, but this dress will fit perfectly." Janet looked at the beautiful lady before her and shook her head. Amara continued to plead her case. "This dress feels like it was made for me. It's the one. I know it's going to be perfect." Janet looked into Amara's hopeful eyes and, against her better judgment, sighed. "All right, just for your wedding day, but it must be returned the next day in perfect condition." Amara's face lit up. "Thank you. You won't regret this." But Janet would soon realize that she would regret it more than she could have ever imagined. On the day of her wedding, Amara was glowing, dressed in the gown. She was on her way to her wedding venue to meet the photographer with her bridesmaids. However, before any photos were taken, her car was involved in a tragic accident. Amara was killed instantly, and the wedding was never realized. The dress, now stained and carrying an ominous weight, was returned to Janet's shop by a grieving family member 2 days later. Janet's attempts to find out why the dress was returned late fell on deaf ears. The old lady refused to speak, and as quietly as she came, she left, leaving Janet with more questions than answers. Curious, Janet searched the internet for any pictures of Ngozi on the wedding day, but to her amazement, there were none. Strangely, no photos of Amara in the dress existed. Friends and family later mentioned that all attempts to capture her in the dress resulted in blurred or corrupted images. When Janet did learn of Amara's demise, she fell back into her chair in shock. Days later, Janet cleaned the dress and put it back in the display window. She put the tragedy behind her and tried to move on. Weeks later, a 32-year-old woman called Ifeoma, a successful entrepreneur known for her thriving fashion line, walked into Janet's shop while searching for something extraordinary for her destination wedding. When she laid eyes on the dress, she was immediately captivated. Janet refused Ifeoma's request. She had had this conversation several times with many brides-to-be, but Ifeoma offered a sum of money Janet couldn't turn down. She gave Ifeoma the terms. The dress must be returned to me in perfect condition the day after the wedding. On her wedding day, Ifeoma attempted to post pictures of herself in the dress on Instagram, but the images either failed to upload or appeared distorted. As Ifeoma stood at the altar, her groom suddenly collapsed, suffering a fatal heart attack before they could exchange vows. The joyous event turned into a scene of devastation. Ifeoma vanished from the public eye, her once thriving career ruined by the tragedy. Days later, the dress was returned to Janet. When she asked of Ifeoma and how the wedding went, the family member left the shop in tears. Janet again searched social media for any clues, but more importantly, to see pictures of Ifeoma in the wedding dress. But to her amazement, there were none. Just tragic headlines of the groom that dropped dead at the altar. Janet wondered what kind of bad luck was going on. The dress brought her good fortune, but had now been in the hands of two brides who suffered fatalities on their wedding day. Janet brushed off the notion as nonsense. It was just a tragic coincidence, that's all, she told herself. That was until the day Zainab, a bright, cheerful 28-year-old school teacher from a modest background, discovered the dress while helping a friend shop for wedding attire. She became obsessed with the dress and insisted on renting it for her own upcoming wedding, despite Janet's initial refusal. Zainab offered her entire savings, leaving Janet torn but ultimately accepting. After wearing the dress, Zainab's life began to unravel even before her wedding day. She tried to share her wedding dress photos online, but each image featuring the dress appeared blurred or corrupted. Zainab started experiencing violent nightmares, and paranoia convinced her fiancé was unfaithful. Her behavior became erratic, leading to a public breakdown at her engagement party. The wedding was called off, and Zainab was later institutionalized. The dress was quietly returned to Janet's shop by Zainab's distraught family. Janet was convinced now. The dress, as stunning and beautiful as it was, seemed to be cursed, but only to those who attempted to wear it. Weeks after Zainab's tragic downfall, Janet's shop was unusually quiet. She was adjusting a mannequin when the door burst open with a loud bang. A woman stood in the doorway, her face gaunt, her eyes wild with fury and fear. "You!" the woman screamed, storming into the shop. Janet recognized her instantly, Ifeoma, the bride whose wedding had ended in disaster. "Ifeoma, what?" Janet began, but Ifeoma cut her off. "Don't you dare say my name," Ifeoma hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You knew, didn't you? You knew that dress was cursed." Janet's heart pounded in her chest. "I didn't know anything, I swear. It's just a dress." "Just a dress?" Ifeoma laughed bitterly, a sound filled with pain. "My fiancé died in front of me, on our wedding day, and you let me wear that cursed thing. I did some research and a little digging and discovered that me, Amara, and Zainab all had one thing in common. We all rented that wedding dress from you." She pointed to the dress in the window display. Janet's eyes filled with tears. I have no idea what you're talking about." She lied. Ifeoma stepped closer, her face inches from Janet's. "I did a little digging about you too. This shop used to be on the brink of closure. Then all of a sudden this store became the #1 stop of hopeful brides-to-be," she whispered. "This dress destroys lives and you knew it." Janet felt a chill run down her spine. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. That's not true." "I'm going to the police," Ifeoma spat. "And if they won't stop you, I will." With that, she stormed out of the shop, leaving Janet standing there, trembling. The confrontation had threatened to ruin her. If word got out to the public about a cursed wedding dress, she would be out of business, and worse, she would go broke. Janet knew she had to do something. If the dress truly is cursed, there was only one place to go. Her father. He had always been her rock ever since her mother died. On hearing his daughter's bizarre and worrying story, he took her to see a very powerful shaman. The dress carries the soul of a very young woman who was tragically murdered on her wedding day. She had been set up by her sister and husband, shot in the back of the head, and left for dead on a dark dirt road. Her name was Ngozi, and before she took her last breath, she cursed her sister and husband. The shaman muttered something under her breath and then turned to Janet and said, "As far as the police are concerned, Ngozi's new husband was taken away and killed by armed robbers, his body discarded and eaten by wild animals. The case went cold as Ngozi's body was never found either." Janet and her father shook their heads in disbelief. The truth of the matter, however, is that the husband and the sister are far away in a distant land, enjoying her sister's wealth. With Ngozi legally married to her husband, he was entitled to have certain documents signed over to him. So while Ngozi greeted and spoke with wedding guests, David and her sister Rema were in another room transferring deeds, business documents, and assets into his name as her legal husband. Janet finally found the voice to speak. "This is all so sad, poor Ngozi. She had no idea." "She didn't," the shaman continued, "until the night they killed her. She cursed them both before her spirit began to roam in search for them." "So what do I do now, wise one?" Janet asked, her voice trembling. "The only way to break the curse is to bring her killers to justice." "But wise one, if she's looking for her killers to be brought to justice, then why does she kill innocent brides like herself?" "Because she is not herself. A dark force guides her. Once her killers are brought to justice, her soul will be set free, and she will be able to cross over," the shaman responded. Janet whispered, "But why me? Why has she chosen me to bring her killers to justice?" "Because the moment you saw the wedding dress in the trash and claimed it as your own was the day you took on the burden of Ngozi's spirit." Janet looked at her father. "The longer her killers are free, the more young women she will destroy the moment they wear the dress." The shaman murmured to herself, then looked to Janet. "Your time is running out. Find her killers fast, or you too will be destroyed." Janet returned to the city a total wreck. The further she traveled away from the village, the less the impact of the shaman's words of warning were to her. And so by the time Janet reached her shop back in Lagos, she was less sure of what she had to do. Despite the shaman's words, Janet had no proof of what the shaman had said. She had promised her father to go to the police. But go to the police? With what? The ramblings of an old village shaman? Janet shook her head. No, she would not get involved. She planned never to rent the dress again. No matter how much money anyone offered, she would not let the dress leave the shop. As the weeks went by, Janet's life began to unravel. She experienced vivid, terrifying nightmares of Ngozi's betrayal and death. the gunshot, the betrayal by her sister, and the cursed final words echoing in Janet's mind. During the day, Janet saw fleeting images of Ngozi's ghost in mirrors, shop windows, and even standing at the edge of her bed at night. The dress's influence grew stronger, casting a dark shadow over Janet's life and relationships. Friends and family began to notice Janet's erratic behavior. She became withdrawn, constantly paranoid, and plagued by the belief that Ngozi's spirit was watching her every move. Objects in her home started to move on their own. Lights flickered, and the whispers grew louder. Even her customers started to sense something unsettling about Janet and her shop. Janet attempted to lock the dress away, but it inexplicably reappeared in the shop's display window each morning, pristine and glowing. She tried to avoid the shop altogether, but the dress called to her in her dreams, drawing her back. The spirit's grip on Janet tightened, leaving her no escape from the haunting. In a desperate attempt to free herself, Janet tried to destroy the dress, setting it on fire, cutting it apart, and even burying it deep in the ground. But each attempt failed. The dress remained untouched, as if indestructible. One night, Ngozi's ghost fully manifested before Janet, revealing the full story of her betrayal and death. With a chilling voice, Ngozi cursed Janet for profiting off her pain, vowing that anyone who touched the dress would suffer the same fate. Janet, now broken and terrified, begged for forgiveness. Ngozi's spirit demanded that Janet bring her killers, David and Rima, to justice or face the consequences herself. Determined to escape the curse, Janet gathered all the evidence she'd collected, including news articles, photos, and her personal experiences, and took it to the police. At the police station, Janet desperately tried to convince the officers of the words the shaman had told her about Ngozi's death. "Ma'am, we deal in facts and evidence, not shamans, ghosts, and curses," the detective said. Janet sat forward in the chair. "But you have to believe me. Ngozi can't rest because her killers are still at large." "Her killers have been brought to justice," the detective interrupted. "The armed men that hijacked the couple and killed them are in prison as we speak. They disposed of the newlyweds' bodies. Neither have been found since, and none of the gunmen are talking. That's because they have been paid off for their silence," Janet responded. "Evidence. Do you have anything that you can prove, ma'am?" "What about her sister, Rema?" Janet said. "She was in it with David." "Find Rema, and you'll find David Olamide. Rema now lives in Chicago in the USA. She has been very instrumental in this investigation. No one wanted the killers of her sister and brother-in-law brought to justice more than Rema DK. And don't you think it's strange that in 2025, Rema DK has no social media presence? That still does not make her a killer of her own sister," the detective yelled. Janet sat back in the chair and sighed heavily. This is pointless, she thought. And what if the officers were right and she was being played by a shaman and hallucinations? Look, go home, think about seeing a therapist, but as far as this case is concerned, it's closed. The detective walked out. With no real evidence, the police dismissed her story, refusing to act on claims involving ghosts and curses. They saw her as unstable, and her pleas fell on deaf ears. Janet left the station, feeling hopeless and abandoned, with the police unwilling to help her or even take an interest in her story. Janet felt she had failed to bring Ngozi's killers to justice. Days after her visit to the police, Janet mysteriously disappeared. Her shop reopened on its own, but there was no sign of Janet. The cursed wedding dress was back in the display window, pristine and glowing, as if nothing had ever happened. Years later, David and Rema secretly returned to Nigeria, believing that enough time had passed for them to safely come back without fear of their past being uncovered. They thought Ngozi's tragic end would be forgotten by now. They moved to a remote village and bought a modest yet luxurious home surrounded by acres of farmlands, hoping to finally live in peace away from the shadows of their past. They moved into their new home, full of hope for a future where they no longer had to look over their shoulders. But all bad deeds done in the dark must come to light. The next morning, David and Rama were found dead, terror etched across their lifeless faces. Although her killers had paid the ultimate price for their tragic crime against her, Ngozie's ghost continued to wander, forever haunting the cursed wedding dress and anyone who dared to wear it. Hey, story lovers, I hope you enjoyed the story. It was fun to write. But what do you think? Is there such a thing as curses and cursed wedding dresses? Comment down below and don't forget to subscribe. I'm off to edit my next story, so bye for now.